So, a very warm welcome again to the IKI Brown Bag Lunch on the end of life management of in the cooling sector, and particularly the Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance, COPA, which will be introduced to you today. My name is Mark Nowakowski. I work with the IKI office at ZUG in Berlin. Cooling is an important and growing issue in many parts of the world, the more so as the world is constantly heating up. And then we have climate change and the emission of greenhouse gases, which is a major issue for the whole planet. And the mitigation of ozone depleting substances has been a relevant and ongoing issue for decades concerning everyone. So here we have a project and initiative funded by the International Climate Initiative, which addresses or addressed all three matters at once. And today we are to learn how they are linked together, as hardly anybody actually understands what the problem is and what synergy potential is created by such a combined approach. This was even more so when the project started in 2013. Back then, this was a really novel and innovative approach. At first, the project was named Management and Destruction of Ozone Depleting and Climate Damaging Substances in Cooling Devices. Later in 2021, it was renamed Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance on ODS and HFC banks management, reflecting its new focus. I've been overseeing the project from the IKI office side since 2020 until its completion at the end of last year. And today I am excited to give the floor to its representatives so all of us can learn more about this combined approach, about the challenges on its way and its achievements. Let us quickly go through the agenda. I'm particularly glad to welcome Rachel Pecker from the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Climate Action, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, and a member of the steering committee of COPA, who has been with the project for quite some years and who will give us a brief overview on the impact and role of COPA from the perspective of the ministry. Following Rachel, Ellen Michel from GIZ Pro Klima will give us an introduction on the end-of-life management in the cooling sector. Before the COPA project and alliance will be introduced to us by Ellen and Yunro Izu from UNIDO, member of the COPA Secretariat, and Samuel Jacobs from Energy Partners and also member of the COPA Steering Committee. And finally, later on, there will be time for discussion and your questions. And with this, I would like to warmly welcome Rachel, and I'm very glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Mark, and welcome to everybody from my side as well, and welcome also on behalf of the Ministry for Environment, Climate Action, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety. We have a very long name now for the ministry, so bear with us. Yeah, I had the pleasure to work with COPA from the beginning of COPA, not from the very beginning of this project, but from the beginning of the COPA Alliance, which was initiated in 2021. The thought behind it was really back then we had a blind spot, both on the side of the Montreal Protocol, which looked at this issue more from a perspective of environmental issues, and also looked at really the ozone depleting problems of cooling appliances. And also the Paris Agreement didn't really have the cooling sector as a problematic area that is becoming bigger and bigger, didn't really look at that much as well. Combining that, we saw that there's a huge problem, not just with the management of new appliances, but also especially the old ones. So we're creating a bigger and bigger problem. We're creating banks of both ODS, so ozone depleting substances, but also HFCs. And both of them are highly climate relevant as well. So therefore, the ministry commissioned GIZ in collaboration with UNIDO and UNDP to create COPA. And so COPA was initiated in 2021. From back then, some time has passed, and we see that the topic of sustainable life cycle management of these substances and also the banks that are created, the awareness has risen. So we have come quite a step closer to where we need to be, at least on the awareness side. Both the Montreal Protocol has shed some more light on the issue. There has been more and more discussions on the issue. What are we going to do with old appliances? How are we going to recycle them? How are we going to tap into this issue? But also on the side of the Paris Agreement, as a couple of years ago, it was for the first time that the Montreal Protocol actually had a pavilion at the COP as well. And so the issue of the cooling sector of HFCs has been brought to the climate negotiators as well. And so one thing that we also wanted to create with COPA is kind of like combining these two worlds and getting people to talk to each other from these two different areas that have been working a little bit in silos, but that really need to, in this topic, really need to talk to each other and can work on these solutions together as well. And we believe that COPA definitely had a role to play in this. I think we can't take on maybe all the credit, but at least a little bit of the credit I think we can give to COPA in this regard. So COPA has grown immensely over the last years, and we now look at an alliance with 83 members, of which 26 are countries, but we also have the private sector in there. We have multilateral organizations in there. So really quite a diverse alliance. And from my experience in the last few years, I can also say it's not just a diverse alliance. The people that are in there and the organizations that are in there, the topic is really at their heart and they're really passionate about it. And we had some really engaging discussions in those different areas. So as I said before, COPA has supported the awareness raising of the issue. There is now major interest in the end of life management. There is still a lot to do though, so we haven't really come up with the solution, but we're working on solutions. So I think we're getting closer, but we're not there yet. But COPA has stepped in here as well and actually shown and supported pilot project and project developments and shown how a solution, how we can handle this problem, how we can at least start to bring in people to look into problems. Also has shown what problems arise when we try to handle those problems. So there's a lot of learnings from COPA for the community here. The alliance, and I'm sure that Ellen and the colleagues will do a much better job at showcasing to you how COPA is set up and what it all achieved. But just to mention, COPA has 4 working groups, which do an immense job as well. And being able to say that, at least in the financing working group, we had some really lively discussions, not always with people that had the same view on things, but that made it even more interesting. And people really came in and engaged quite deeply. There's also a lot of resources that COPA has brought out in the last few years that now are available to the broader audience and that can help in the long run as well to handle this issue. So I don't want to speak too much longer. I just want to say that I'm very glad that COPA was set up by the ministry and has been able to kickstart the alliance, and that COPA will not end here. I want to thank the GIZ for its work in setting up the alliance, and UNIDO and UNDP for supporting that. And I want to thank UNIDO for taking on the Secretariat of the Alliance from now, and with the support of UNDP as well. And I'm sure that will engage further. And just as a little anecdote as well, even in the ministry, the topic has become a little bit more in the focus as we now, as we came back after the last elections to the Ministry of Environment. We have a new division now, really looking from climate perspective into sectoral emissions and really looking into this issue as well, working on the cooling sector from the climate perspective. So thank you so much, and I really hope you enjoy this brown bag lunch and hear a lot of interesting information, but also engage in the discussions afterwards.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. And with this, I hand over to Ellen from GIZ.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for hosting this IKI Brown Bag Lunch and for giving us the opportunity to present here on the cooling sector and on the Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance. Thank you, Rachel, for the opening words, but also for all the support with the different ministries where IKI was hosted, and therefore also this project and the funding and the engagement came from. And before we go into more details on the Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance, for you, dear participants, I will start out with giving a bit more context on the cooling sector and on the topic end-of-life management, as I'm not sure how familiar everyone already is with that. So here on this first slide, the point I want to make is cooling is really a cross-cutting topic. It's everywhere. So we talk about cooling in respect with the transportation and storage of food and of vaccines. We're talking about air conditioning, so cooling comfort of buildings. We're talking about industrial coolings. There is mobile air conditioning in cars and other means of transportation, etc. And all this does have an effect on many different sustainable development goals that you see lined out here, on health, on poverty reduction, on climate and energy, obviously. Next, please. So now a bit more specifically in the cooling sector, what is this topic end-of-life management? End-of-life in the cooling sector can be the appliances, the electronic appliances, so the refrigerators, air conditions, cooling equipment, freezers. But what we are focusing on here is actually the substances contained in the appliances, so the refrigerants themselves and also the foams that are being used for insulation. And these substances have been a very long time the refrigerants ozone depleting substances, so creating or contributing, unfortunately, to the ozone hole. And they have then been replaced with the Montreal Protocol and a lot of efforts globally with hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, so other substances, that are no longer ozone depleting, but unfortunately they are highly climate damaging because they have high global warming potentials. So there's another challenge. And eventually, actually, there are also other refrigerants, natural refrigerants. That's what GIZ ProClima is promoting, that also do not destroy the ozone layer and at the same time do not contribute, or very minimally only, to global warming. But in general, we can say the situation as it is globally today, we have global warming, so we need more cooling, but the additional cooling actually also contributes, unfortunately, to additional warming. With all the cooling appliances and cooling systems we have globally, we do have running systems, but we also have systems that are no longer being used. And those systems and appliances that are no longer being used, we consider them at their end of life. At the end of life, usually there are still refrigerants inside the appliances. And the question is, what happens to those? If they are just not treated, they are vented, they are emitted to the atmosphere, and they then actually create large damages. When we're talking about end-of-life management, we do want to avoid this. What you see here in this graph, even though it's a bit small, is an estimation of the increase of those refrigerants. We call them banks. You can also say stocks. So they actually grow and grow year by year, which of course has an overall negative effect. Next, please. So the emissions that are created by those refrigerants and also foams, when they are released to the atmosphere, we have environmental impacts, climate impacts, and ozone destruction. And the hydrofluorocarbon-based refrigerants do actually have very high global warming potentials. I mean, there are different ones, but there's a range of up to 12,500 CO2 equivalents. So that's why the cooling sector itself might not be that huge and the refrigerants being used, but just because of these high global warming potentials, the impact is very significant. Next. So here you see just some examples of different refrigerants. So really the worst one we have is ozone depleting, the R12, so that's the chemical name. It's a chlorofluorocarbon, and the global warming potential for over 100 years is estimated to be 12,500 CO2 equivalent. So this is what I was talking about. Then the HFCs, they are still also up to 771 global warming potential, and that is actually one which is relatively low. And then you have the natural refrigerants I was referring to earlier, and there you see a global warming potential below 1. They're also not ozone depleting, and they also do not contain or PFAS, which are the forever chemical that then also, again, do harm to the environment. Next. So this is one graph out of a publication that was prepared during the time of the project of the Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance. And this is also to show you the banks, the stores of the refrigerants, so the F gases, the fluorinated gases. And you see here calculations generated from reported figures from all countries. And then you see extrapolations on how the banks will develop probably until 2050. And this graph is to show you there are different substances in it, but let's stay with the overall figures. So in 2022, this was the data that was used for the calculation. We had a total of 7,680 kilotons of ozone-depleting substances and hydrofluorocarbons, and that is equivalent to 13.4 gigatons CO2. Those are huge numbers. What does that actually mean? It means if those refrigerants are not being treated, if they are just left by themselves and they go up into the atmosphere, it's about 1 megaton CO2 equivalent per day. So I think that shows the significance. And for those of you that don't deal with megatons CO2 equivalents every day, next slide, what does that mean? Here are some examples of what that is in comparison. I will just read out one. It's the annual CO2 emissions from powering about 125,000 European homes. And this is emitted daily by the refrigerants no longer being in use. So I think that says it all. Hopefully, it's a very significant challenge and it's a huge or enormous mitigation potential which is there. Next. And what is this end of life management now? What can be done to actually treat the refrigerants? Here you see the circle of how refrigerants actually go through their life. They are usually being imported into countries, then they are being repacked, they are then sent to the appliances on the left-hand corner. This is where they are being used for the cooling purposes, technicians that handle this. And once the appliance is no longer needed or the refrigerant is not working perfectly anymore, that is also possible. There are different options on how to go about it. The first one is you have to recover it. You have to take it out of the appliance again. And then what do you do with the recovered substance? The first option is you recycle it right there on site. So it's actually taken out, it's being cleaned, it's being reintroduced into the machine, and the cooling system works again. That's the most simple version of reuse. The second option is either the appliance is no longer being needed or the refrigerant is polluted and cannot be cleaned on site. So then it is being sent back to in the middle, you see the reclamation facility. Reclamation is actually a form of chemical treatment. So there the refrigerant is being treated and treated in a way that it reaches again 99% of the virgin quality. Once this is reached, it can be reused. So it's entered again into the cooling cycle. In case we're talking about ozone depleting substances or also about refrigerants that are very polluted, this is not an option. And then we go to destruction. And destruction, right-hand corner, lower corner, this is that the refrigerants are actually being burned and totally destroyed so that the dangerous emissions actually do not leave the facility and the atmosphere and the climate do not suffer additional harm. That is what is end-of-life management. There's a lot more to it. This is just to show you a little bit the picture of what we're talking about. And with that, I would like to hand over to Yunri to start talking about the Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance.
Thank you very much, Aileen. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, other members of the COPA. My name is Yunri Zhou, Industry Development Officer from the Climate Innovation and the Multipolitical Division of UNIDO. I'm so happy to join this Brown Bag lunch meeting with all of you. I think as a member of the COPA, you already know the history of the COPA very well. As mentioned by Rehal, the COPA was established in 2021 by the German Federal Ministry of Economy Affairs and Climate Action. And with the three objectives. The first objective is to establish an initiative on the ODS and the HFC bank management. And as you see today, this is very we are very successful. This initiative was established very successful globally. Second objective at that time, at the very beginning, is to promote the international dialogue and exchange on the management of the ODS and the HFC banks, but also their unwanted waste. Actually, this is also very successful. As you can see in the last 4 or 5 years, we organize many meetings under the thematic area and for the environment sound management of the HFC and ODS banks. Last but not least, the third objective is to significantly reduce emission of the ODS and the HFC emission to the air. I just give you the two figures. This is from the Ozone Secretariat regarding the indicator for the year 2024, because so far this is available data globally. In the year 2024, with the global efforts, we reduced about 100 ODP tons of the HFCs globally. And also, in addition, we reduce 148 million CO2 equivalent tons of the HFCs, even with the increased cooling demands. I mean, this is a part of those reduce of the consumption of the HFC and HFC. I think also coming from our COPA project as the part of the global efforts. And the COPA project, as you know, that was commissioned and by the ZIDAT with the support of UNIDO and UNDP. We are so happy to one of their contributor for the COPA project. So next slide, please. And actually, today I know that even before the establishment of the COPA, there are also a lot of intensive discussion. But actually, for the COPA project, there are two phases. I can see now, from 2021 to 2025. This is the first phase of the COPA project, and with the joint efforts, especially the members of the COPA, and also the excellent support of the JJH. And their project also established a good website and the mailbox and the newsletters. From the website, I just want to share with you that a lot of knowledge products still today you can also see in the website. That this is very helpful for the development of their national action plan for their for their ODS and HFC banks management in your country. Second, so far there are totally 83 members in across 26 countries, and I think more and more members also is willing to join the COPA according to the feedback. And also, as I mentioned, we organize many meetings to exchange experience, both from Latin America, Africa, Asia, but also their valuable experience from Europe and with all the members. And we also have the 4 thematic working group I will introduce later on, and I think you know that very well. And also we have the also steering committee. And with these joint efforts, we to allow 2 achievements. I think those achievements will be very helpful for us to continue our efforts for the development inventory of the ODS and HFC banks, but also development of national action plan in your country. From this year, actually, even the COPA project, the phase 1 was closed, but still the COPA alliance is continue. UNIT is happy to continue support the maintenance of their website and also some of the newsletters, as well as together with their other UN agency, especially UNDP, we support their member countries for their exchange of the meetings, but also steering committee. So, next slide. For the next phase, I just want to highlight here about the 2 key issues. Want to share with all of you. The first one is regarding their from their multilateral fund secretariat. Maybe all of you heard about the decision 9166 regarding the development of their national inventory of their HFC and the ODS bank in the country, and also develop the national action plan. I think most of the country now is working on this 2K document environment. And I think their COPA project, our knowledge products, will be very, very helpful for the development of the inventory, but also the next action plan. This is also their the impacts of this project. Secondly, I just want to also share that at their last ESCOM meeting, at their 97th ESCOM meeting, board member countries, including Germany, also tried to support to build up a new funding window for the environmental sound management of the ODS waste, and also suggest the Multilateral Fund Secretariat to submit a proposal on their funding modalities, cost guideline, and for their final disposal of the ODS and HFC banks. I think this information also give us a clear message. This is also we need to continue to work this area for their environmental sound management of the ODI, unwanted of ODS and HFC waste in the future. And regarding the COPA project, we also successfully established a full thematic working group, including the policy framework, technical solutions, financial mechanism, and also implementation models. I just want to share this is a really integrated approach for their ODS and HFC banks management, because regarding the gap analysis on their policy framework, as well as their gap analysis on their available technologies for and also infrastructure for the environmental sound management of the unwanted waste, as well as all the potential financial mechanism, you can find all those reports in our website of the COPA, and those documents, guideline, still I think very, very helpful for the country to move forward for their management of the ODS and also HFC banks, but also environmental sound management of the unwanted waste. So given that, I give the floor to the colleagues. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yunri. And then I will continue. Here on this figure, it's actually shown how COPA materials that were developed during the time of the project actually support the member countries, the 26 countries, in the different steps that are necessary to select, prioritize, and implement the strategy for life cycle refrigerant management and also for end-of-life management of ozone-depleting substances and hydrofluorocarbons. So you see, starting out with what Yunri just pointed out, inventories, what's all there, what's in a country, then gap analysis, how to conduct it, what is the existing infrastructure, physical infrastructure, what are the policies that already exist or do not exist, what is the finance which is available, or which different schemes could be developed. Then out of this, to develop more detailed status quo reports in the countries and develop national plans with the prioritization in it. And after the planning, of course, also support on how to get into implementation. Next. And here now, very few examples of support in different mitigation pilots. We have selected 3 examples. The first one was in China in the field of mobile air conditioning. So we're talking about automobiles and their cooling systems. There we worked on refrigerant recycling. So while a car being maintained at the workshop, also looking at the air conditioning and recycling the refrigerant so that it can be reused in the same car, and that actually also the system is checked that there are no leakages. And with that, actually, we supported by training the technicians on how to properly do it, but also worked a lot on the topic of how to measure the results. So with the baseline preparation and also different scenario calculations. Another example was in Grenada, there is an existing recovery, recycling, and reclamation center. What was missing is actually a business model on how to sustainably, cost efficiently run this center. So this was developed together with the partners. The result was finding enough finance for getting a whole system, a center being set up is difficult, but once it's there to run it on a sustainable way, this is possible with the fee calculations that were developed and with the involvement of different stakeholders. Next slide. The third example here was looking into the destruction of ozone depleting substances. This was a pilot which actually included the transport of large tanks, large cylinders of refrigerants from Zimbabwe to South Africa, because in Zimbabwe there are no destruction facilities, as in many countries. And it's a tricky issue because this is transportation of hazardous waste. And then the Basel Convention comes into the picture. So a lot of administrative and procedural aspects have to be clarified and dealt with. And the actual destruction then happened in a company, in a waste management company in South Africa. So these are 12. So the worst of the worst that I was saying earlier has been successfully destroyed. Also the old cylinders, the large tanks, have also been destroyed. So that was a successful pilot where also we generated a lot of lessons learned, and which is also shared with the different COPA members, of course. And with that, I would like to hand over, and I'm very happy you joined us, to Samuel, who is the head of the COPA Steering Committee.
Thank you, Ellen. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone is well. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon. I think the COPA Steering Committee definitely sends the regards and greetings. Our steering committee consists of myself, Samuel Jacobs from Energy Partners in South Africa. I participate from the private sector perspective. Also, my colleague Adrian is also in the private sector. And then our two colleagues, Leslie and Igorbe, are from a country perspective. And of course, you guys have met Rachel, which is from the German ministry. Next slide. Okay, so for us as a steering committee, our primary mandate to date is that we want to see member-driven activity across the alliance. So we want to see an uptick of member-driven activity in the alliance. I think as Yunri, as well as Alan and Rachel as well, mentioned that we have well over 80 members within the alliance, and quite a decent spread between public sector and private sector and institutions or of study or of further learning. And what we want to do is try and enhance those members' activities in the regions that they find themselves in. And so we asked ourselves late last year as a steering committee, what would be an easy way that we could engage with the members to give them some direction in terms of higher levels of activity or participation. And so we put our minds together and spoke about a nodal map. And the nodal map, the idea behind the nodal map is that we wanted to, within the existing frameworks, it's already been crafted by those who were before us, which we think is really quite good, because it covers quite a wide spectrum. Even though it's just 4 thematic groups, it's very hard to find a singular activity that falls outside of that group. So what we decided to do is take that groups that's already established and are already delivering results, as Alan has just demonstrated on previous slides. We plot them as nodes on a map, and then we connect the different activities that actually connect these different thematic groups. And what that does is that it allows the members not just to work within the groups that they're participating in, but to see how their group connects with the other thematic groups that are established, and what are those activities that connect those groups. And what we're hoping that will do is allow those members to look broader from what they're doing. And hopefully what we want to see is that when there is a technology thematic working group meeting, that we'll see people from finance attending those meetings, we'll see people from policy frameworks attending those meetings and implementation and so forth, and vice versa for the East groups, because now they understand the linkages between the thematic groups, and specifically how they can participate and connect their activities to the other group. So the connections between those nodes is then those specific activities that we've identified, and then we plotted that and connected it as a visual picture for even a new member that joins in. They can easily see where their activities fit in with the rest of the functions of COPA. And of course, we're hoping that that will drive regional collaboration, which is something that I'll touch on just now, so that we can have members in different regions really working closer together, and start to see that results coming through from the members. So from this exercise, we saw some concepts emerging, which was quite interesting for us as a group to discuss. Is that we saw that within the current activities that we are active in, we call that the space, that space formation we call the current space, and it's a summation of where are we currently active, and what are the activities that we are highly successful in, and that creates the current space. And what we want to ask ourselves there is, what are these existing practices and processes that we may be able to change? Even though we're doing well in them, is there opportunity to tweak them, to enhance them, or to better them? And that's the current space. Then the next space we saw emerging is what we call the intermediate space. And the intermediate space is where we see the nurturing of newer trends that is not quite yet established, but we can see that if these trends are nurtured, they may lead to newer technologies that can actually transform our reality. And so we call that the intermediate space. And we found that space exists between new technologies, finance that supports it, and policy that drives regulation around that. And then the last space that we found is what we call the envisioned space. And that's a space where we're dreaming. That's a space where we're saying, what will end of life management look like in the future? And so that's a space where we found that technology is going to play a big part in that. Of course, again, policy is a central driver on that, but ultimately somebody has to implement it. And ironically, if you look at the nodal map, all of the arrows eventually goes to implementation, which really emphasizes that whatever we work on, whatever we theorize, whatever concepts we come up with, ultimately we want to see that implemented. And so the envision space is where we ask ourselves, what radical and transformative change is required that aligns itself with our evolving values as a nation or people or global citizens. So that is essentially the nodal map, and we're hoping that would be a relatively easy framework for our members to engage with and find. I think Alan was talking about our passions and where our people are functioning. And hopefully somebody can see, look, yes, I'm passionate about emerging trends and how we can nurture them, and they can see immediately that they can lock into the intermediate space. And when they focus on that, they can see what are the thematic groups that are supporting that space: technology, policy, and finance. So hopefully that is what this map will do for members, and we want to introduce that to our members this year, so we can get positive feedback from them and hopefully see an uptick in engagement. Next slide. All right, so for us as a steering committee, we've got some upcoming activities. Of course, I think the first activity is definitely our steering committee meeting, which is planned for the 3rd of March. Essentially what happens in that steering committee meeting is we try and set direction for where we think the Alliance should be focusing on for the year. And as I've previously mentioned, a high focus for us this year is member engagement. And so in that meeting, we'll discuss a little bit about what we call calendar integration. So one of the things that we want to see is that I think in the past, COPA has orientated itself around a global calendar. The National Ozone Days, the Refrigeration Days, and really try and set up activities around a global calendar. But what we found that the missing link there is that we miss what happens in regional areas. We miss what happens in the SADC region of Southern Africa. We miss what happens in Southeast Asia, just regionally amongst the nations that are neighbors with each other there, and where our members actually are. And so what we want to do as a first priority, along with the nodal map, is to start integrating those calendars, to say to our members, tell us, give us some feedback and tell us what are the important events in your calendar around your region that you find is significant to end of life management. And then we want to integrate that into our calendar so that we can start plotting activities around there. And then we were able to tell those members who are the other members that are around them in that region, and then we can get localized activity. So that's part of what we will discuss. And of course, there'll be a few other things that we'll discuss in the steering committee, but primarily that will be the high focus of our discussions. Promote active membership. That's what I've sort of touched on now. But we have had quite a few new members joining COPA from, I think, late last year, from October all the way to November, I think even in December. And I think the Secretariat mentioned the other day that there's 2 more applications that are being processed now that came through in Jan as well. So we want to do a meet and greet with those members and to welcome them to COPA and learn a little bit more about them and hopefully also introduce them to the framework that we've set up for engagement. On the exchange and networking side, we are obviously just privileged to have a well-muscled secretariat like UNIDO. The incredible support that we going to enjoy from UNIDO. So from a secretariat point of view, we'll lean on the secretariat for coordinating newsletters and to support the steering committee, really just to get information out about what we are doing, where we are active, and where our members are active, and some of the breakthrough work that our members are doing. I think, there's even late last year when we had a discussion with one of our members in the Netherlands, just incredible work that they are doing, working with their local government. And so we want to bring that news to everyone and make that accessible to everyone more frequently with the help of the Secretariat. And then, of course, again, as I said, as part of the steering committee, we want to make sure that all our members focus in on implementation. So as much as we want to ideasize, and we want to make sure that there's a lot of ideas being generated and lots of conversation and debate and engagement, we do want to see some development of projects, whether it's in finance technology or whether it's in the implementation sector, but we want to actually see things happening. So I'll mention an example here, which is one that I'm particularly involved in cooling as a service in South Africa. There's obviously the destruction we've done in Thailand and reclamation we've done in Indonesia, but I'll specifically just quickly talk about the work we've done here with cooling as a service. So CAS stands for cooling as a service. And the idea there, in essence, essentially is that if we want to start having an impact in certain refrigeration and industrial sectors, we have to also understand what are the market dynamics for end users in that space. When we drive policy and regulations to say that we need to start moving away from destructive refrigerants, we need to start using natural refrigerants, we have to also look at what are the market dynamics. And what cooling as a service does is it recognizes that there are user groups who has strong enough balance sheets or capable financially to transition from harmful refrigerants to natural refrigerants. But we found that there's economic groups that don't have that capability, because if you've got a small refrigeration system running and you need to transfer it's very difficult for you to take on new costs to do so. So what cooling as a service does, it essentially removes the capital cost for that end user, and it allows that end user just to access that new technology by paying for what they use from the technology. In that way, we can bring new technology with natural refrigerants even to base markets. Next slide. With this slide, I
Thank you,
hand over to
Jamie.
Ellen.
Yes, with that, we will close. This is for those of you that are interested to know more or to have access to all the resources that were prepared. This is our website. I'm also posting it in the chat. Please feel free to access it. There are a lot of information available, and there's also a compendium where basically the most important information is nicely put together and leads you through the different aspects of end-of-life management. And thank you very much for your attention. And we're still here for a few questions. Otherwise, feel free to contact us later on also. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen, Samuel, and Junrui, for your presentations. And yeah, we're running a bit late, so I will stop my screen sharing here, and let's see if we have questions from the audience. The floor is open. Question? Nope. Thanks, Ellen. That's Sarah. Please go on.
Hi, thank you so much for the super interesting presentation. I'm Sarah. I'm working at the IKI office, just like Mark, at ZTG, and I was just wondering about the entire business model. Other members, actually, I couldn't quite understand that. Do they pay fees to be part of the network, say, of the entire COPA, or how is that financed? Are they just sort of profiting and invited, and then business cases are developed elsewhere, and you're still getting funded by someone else than IKI, I assume, because I understood that the project has been finalized and wrapped up by now, but the network is still surviving, which is great because it obviously really hits a spot. I think that's what I understood. Thank you so much.
Sarah would like to answer this.
I can take it if nobody else volunteers. So the network has been set up with a free membership. This was actually to encourage members from different segments, as was mentioned, private sector, country representatives. So this is usually the Ministries of Environment, international ozone units, but also academia and civil society, in addition to financing institutions. Initially, the funding came from IKI, now the Secretariat is being supported and financed currently by UNIDO and UNDP. Eventually, there is an interest, and this is also something we have been working on the last years, to acquire additional funding to be able to implement additional activities. This has proven to be quite difficult. So I think this is also one element of the continued work of the steering committee, but also of the Secretariat to see how to ensure financial sustainability, at least for the Secretariat costs, but ideally also for providing funding for additional project implementation. The intention is that the members between themselves, actually, and there we have the private sector and government institutions, etc., can start projects, and then there have also been quite a lot of resources developed on financing mechanisms and on access to finance. But for now, there's no fund, let's say, created particularly for the Alliance. So that there remains work to be done.
Thank you, Ellen. Are there any more questions from the audience? Buddy from the GIZ.
So, thank you. I cannot resist, since me and Samuel were working on this business case together with cooling as a service, that as Ellen said, there's no dedicated COPA fund as answer to Sarah's questions, but we have pursued other sources of financing. We were considering the MAF, for example. Samuel and I, we were working with somebody from IFC who gave some advice on how to develop the business case to also access other sources to build up financiable business cases. And also the same is with Grenada. So now there are ready to go projects who can also approach other sources. And Samuel has presented the business case from South Africa, quite detailed. It's available on the website, and now we are approached by others who are looking for similar support as well. So it's not, it's open for other additional sources in a good format. So I wanted to add that. Yes, and I have also been in the secretariat, so that's why I know the COPA secretariat. Yes.
Thank you very much, Marlene, for this edition. Katrin, there's a question.
Yes, hello. My name is Catherine. I'm also working at the ZUG. I come originally a little bit from the area of chemicals, and so it's very interesting in your topic is that it's multi-sectional, I would say. So you have chemicals, you have climate, you have waste management. So are you also looking and interacting with other groups, or you mentioned the Montreal protocol at the beginning, but there are others as well that breach those different areas, because you might have a place in all of them a little bit to see also maybe about funding or about other cooperation. So that would be my question.
I mean, Samuel, Yunri, please feel free to come in. During the time of the project and when GIZ managed the secretariat, thank you for the question, Catherine. We did involve also with the climate change focal points in some member countries, not in all of them. So you're of course totally right. This has a relevance to Montreal Protocol, but also to the Paris Agreement. That's why, of course, we're also here within the IKI on the whole mitigation of emission topic. And in addition, also, yes, it's an aspect of circular economy, at least to a certain extent. And there we have also been in a continuous exchange, for example, with the Prevent Waste Alliance that is being supported by BMZ, so by the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, and also seeing if the topic can be integrated into this network. And there, the process is not finalized yet, because there have also been some issues on which are the different focal areas there. So for now, it's still running in parallel. But certainly I agree. And this is actually also very nice. It touches on a lot of different aspects, and there are linkages, but to follow up on all of them is also, is also quite challenging.
Rory, did you want to add something?
No additional, I think Ellen already gave most of their feedback. I also just try to highlight the circular economy regarding the life cycle management of the refrigerants. This is also one part that UNIDO is also working for. But really appreciate their support, financial support from IKI for this project. I think very impactful and meaningful, especially for the Article 5 countries of their Montreal Protocol. Very helpful for them to develop the national inventory, but also national action plan for their ODS bank and HFC banks, and as well as their environmental management of the unwanted waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Junroy and Ellen. Do we have any more questions? So we're running late, and I think first people are leaving already. I mean, I would have some more questions, but I'm in the privileged situation of being in touch with the project. So I would say with this, we're getting to the end of today's session. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. We're looking at a subject which has been brought to many stakeholders' attention by an ambitious project here. And the best thing is the alliance which has been formed is not dead with the completion of the project. As we just saw, it is thriving and it is in good hands with UNIDO and UNDP, taking care of the secretariat. May this important and precious work be continued and intensified for the benefit of all. I thank you very much for your attention and wish you a good afternoon. Goodbye, everybody.